This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
All right, folks, it's that time of the week again, Thursday Kos, in effect, with the founder of the largest online progressive community, Daily Kos. Join that community, become a citizen if you've not already. Also, Civics with a Q. He had some really great information for us last week with the latest civics poll. If you haven't had a chance to, check that out. And also the host of the ever popular podcast, The Brief. Markos joins us once again. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm okay. So we had a panel yesterday. I'm at the Proctor Conference, and I moderated a panel on, guess what? Politics in 2024 and the church's role. No shock there. And it came up, because, when people organize these things, they look at the cycles. So the panel was 2024 and beyond. When we got going to the panel, I said, wait a minute, we got stuff going on in 2023. So we can't ignore that. It's every, folks, wherever you may live, there are races going on even now where you are. And this week, we had a few. We had Wisconsin, we had New Hampshire, we had Kentucky, correct?
Kentucky, Virginia. So we had a whole slew in New Hampshire.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah, it was a good night. Now, most of these were special elections, and we can get to the special elections in a second, but I really want to focus first on Wisconsin, because Wisconsin on April 4, Tuesday, April 4, there is an election for the state Supreme Court. And whoever wins this election will decide control of the court. And we know how important that is moving into 2024 and the presidential election, and the way that Republicans have been trying to use the courts to justify their seditious attempts to undermine our democracy. So absolutely critical. And Tuesday night was the primary. And it was what's called a jungle primary. So everybody runs under the same banner, and then the top, without partisan labels, and the top two move on to the general election. So we got, there's two progressives running. There was a moderate, I use scare quotes, moderate Republican. We know that's a misnomer these days. And then there was like a Trump MAGA right-wing lunatic who already ran for the state Supreme Court and lost previously. So Democrats were hoping that if we couldn't get two Democrats to run against each other, like next best case scenario was this MAGA Trumpy guy, because he's just so absolutely vile. And we got that plan B. We got a great progressive at the top of the ticket, and then we got this loony MAGA Republican running too. But here's what was so exciting about last night. This is a primary, low turnout affair historically. And the reason that there's a general election in April is because conservatives have rigged the system to make sure that high propensity voters, which are usually wealthier, white, older, hence conservative, turn out and vote. If they really were interested in getting maximum voter turnout, obviously they would coincide with presidential elections, or at least a midterm governor's election, right? But that's not what they're interested in. This is how conservatives and basically the white power structure, how they kept control over decades and decades, right? Is they make sure they schedule these weird ass elections. They do the same thing with school boards, right? They slip them in the middle of the summer where nobody's voting. So typically what we're talking about, this is high propensity voters historically, and it's been tough to win these elections because it's hard to get liberals and liberal-minded voters to turn out and vote in these weird off-cycle elections. Well, what happened last night, first of all, two things happened. One, turnout was 40% higher than the last Supreme Court primary in a February 2 years ago. In that turnout, there was, I think, in the last one, there's like 500,000 people voted. I'm not sure we have the final count yet, but it was over 900,000. I mean, it was absolutely nuts. And here's the thing. You add up the two Democrats and the two Republicans, and you tally their vote totals, the two Democrats got 54% of the vote. The two Republicans got 46%. It's not the general election. Who knows what they'll do to get their vote out in April. But what it shows is that liberal voters are becoming high propensity voters. Like that's the sign. We've always talked about how our core base, which is more brown, more black, younger, more single, marriage is a big predictor of vote. All those things benefit Democrats, but they're also the groups that are least likely to vote. Historically, that's changing. And we're seeing that. And so that gets us to these special elections. We didn't just see that in Wisconsin, but we saw that in special elections in New Hampshire, in Virginia, in Kentucky. And there's one more did I say Kentucky? We saw that across the board where our candidates didn't just win these elections, but they dramatically outperformed Biden's numbers in 2020. We're still in February, right? February 22nd, the most off-cycle elections. Virginia, we got the first Black woman to represent Virginia in Congress, and she didn't just win, but in 2020, the Democrat won by 36 points. In 22, let's see, hold on. In 2022, the Democrat won by 30 points. In 2020, won by 36 points. She won by 45 points. So again, it's a pretty solid Democratic district. But again, conservatives always turn out and vote. Like that's the truism. Older, whiter conservatives vote. And it's our base that has had a hard time. Not only are we coming out in the dead of winter to vote in these special elections, but we're doing it at higher numbers, higher levels than conservatives. This is dramatic. This is why we didn't lose last year, because our voters are starting to turn out reliably. And it's, what this tells me right now? It tells me that it's not a fluke, that our voters are actually finally internalizing the importance of voting. And once they become high propensity voters, it means that there's a subset of our voters that we don't have to worry about anymore. We can actually then focus on the younger, the more fringy, less likely to vote people, get new people registered to vote. And so it dramatically changes the math and gives us a real fighting chance next year, not only to take the House, which I think we're favored to, but I think we have a real chance to hold the Senate and to make gains at state legislatures and governorships. So I'm actually really excited about next year. And I didn't think I would say that from a random middle of the winter Tuesday. So it's really exciting news.
So, well, middle of the winter, but let's face it. I mean, the weather's been kind of good these days. It's not, it's not been a terrible winter. Let me just put it that way. So that probably helps somewhat. I want to go back to Wisconsin for a minute. And yes, high propensity. I wonder, though, if some of the Wisconsin voters took a lesson from last November. Because a few more would have turned out. Mandela Barnes is in the Senate. So I wonder if that too was a motivation. It's like, we don't want to go to sleep on this like some of us did in November.
I mean, I don't doubt that that's the case. I would say that Mandela Barnes was so close. Like, it's too soon, Mark. Too soon, man. It hurts my soul.
I apologize.
It's too soon. But yeah, I think that's part of it. And it's this notion now that all elections are important. I mean, conservatives have known that judicial elections, school board elections, that they matter, right? They've always known. They for 50 years, they made that the focus of a lot of their organizing efforts. And liberals for years and years and years, all they cared about was the presidential, right? So you had people that would go nuts for Bernie Sanders and then do nothing the rest of the time, even though those are the elections that had the biggest impact. And so it was really frustrating to see. And I don't want to pick on Bernie Sanders. I mean, before that, it was Obama versus Hillary Clinton, and then Howard Dean versus John Kerry. Like, that's what everybody obsessed about. And yeah, obviously the presidency matters, but all these other elections matter. The reason Texas doesn't have the right to an abortion right now is because what should be a light blue state, and at the very least a purple state, is a red state because it has some of the lowest voting percentages amongst core progressive demographics like Latinos. So this is the challenge that we've had, and there is absolutely a shift. It helps also that the suburbs are moving in our direction. Like, let's not, because again, that's high propensity voters. It's wealthier, whiter, and even browner and Black people who live in the suburbs are more likely to be, more educated, which always is another predictor of voting patterns. But it is clear that those built-in advantages that Republicans had are becoming less and less. I'm not ready to say, I don't think we have enough data to say like, okay, we're at parity. I still think we have to work harder than they do, but we are getting there. And every election that our core voters participate in locks in those voting patterns, and they're more likely to vote the following election. I mean, the rule of thumb in Political Science 101 is that once somebody votes in 2 straight elections, that they're a voter for life. I don't know if it's true. I haven't seen the data to back that up, but there's a certain internal logic to it that it sounds good anyway. And I don't doubt that there is some truth to it. So that's what's so critical. And then if we get to the point where we don't have to worry about certain demographics voting anymore, then we can, again, focus on registering those 18-year-olds, which are going to be our strongest voters, because they are incredibly, they're more liberal than me and you, Mark. I mean, they're like next level liberals. So it's going to be great for the progressive movement if we can focus on getting those people electorally engaged, as opposed to trying to get 40, 50-year-olds to turn out.
Jennifer McClellan, first African-American woman to represent Virginia in Congress. So what does that do to the congressional piece? Is that a pickup?
No, that's a solid Democratic seat. So it doesn't. It's less. We knew we were going to win it. The question wasn't whether we're going to win or lose. The question is those margins. The fact that our people, even though the outcome was predetermined, even though it wasn't particularly the most competitive race, people turned out in big numbers. And part of me hopes it's her. I don't know much about her. I'm not apologize for that, but the difference in turnout rates is absolutely dramatic. And so that means either she's an amazing candidate, or it just means that voters in that district are going to turn out whether it matters or not. They're ready to turn out and they're ready to vote. And that's the part that really excites me, that if we can get progressives to get excited about voting no matter what, like they already do that. If we can get there, it dramatically, because there's more of us than them. And so the less we have to focus on voting on reliable voters and more we can focus on unreliable voters, which, a lot of it is youth voters, the better we are going to be moving forward.
No, that's important. New Hampshire. So just to drill down a little more.
New Hampshire is a pickup. Yeah.
That's a pickup.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they have the New Hampshire House has the smallest majority margin in the history of New Hampshire. So I think they're down to Republicans have a 3-seat majority. And it's I don't know if you know anything about the New Hampshire House, but it's got like 10,000 members. I mean, I think like every other block in New Hampshire has. I think there's like 600 members in the New Hampshire House. It's something absolutely absurd. And
wow.
So, and it's a small state, obviously, right? So it's actually a kind of a hilarious chamber, and people will quit because in the middle of it. So there's a very real chance that it might even flip before the year is out, because it's that close right now, and it's that volatile a chamber.
All right, and then tell us more about the race in Kentucky.
So Kentucky, this is actually Mitch McConnell's home district. It's one of those districts where it's like the Virginia one, which is a solidly Democratic district. I believe it's a Memphis district, and Mitch McConnell lives there, but it's incredibly bougie and liberal and rich white people. And so it wasn't surprising that a Democrat won, but the margin of victory once again was dramatically higher. And it's really speaking to that trend that we saw literally everywhere last night, that that Democrats outperformed. So this district is 73% white. Biden won at 66-33, and the Democrat last night won it with won it by I gotta zoom in because it's 77. So it was like an 11, almost a 20-point net shift from 2020 to today. So again, it just speaks to Democrats being motivated even in off weird time elections, which historically has never been the case. And in fact, Republicans have traditionally used these types of special elections to win pretty heavily Democratic seats because our people are just sleepwalking or just asleep and aren't paying attention. And it doesn't look like that's going to be happening anymore. And it shows that our people are motivated to vote no matter what, no matter when. And that is what's really important.
No, that is very important. So that's good. And hopefully will continue to be high propensity voters as well. But folks, again, these local elections matter. And you mentioned something too before I leave this topic. You mentioned what's going on in Texas, and there's no right to abortion. Now that the Supreme Court has kicked women's reproductive rights back to the states, you almost have to wonder if that's going to backfire on it. Is this going to mobilize more of us to vote and to continue to be consistent high propensity voters in these state elections so we can get some of this power back, get reproductive rights back? We're all bracing for the reversal of affirmative action. I mean, it's a whole bunch of things that are on the block. Maybe now people realize, well, hey, we really got to take these state races more seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't say it better than that. I'm just gonna let it go. You got it. That's good.
No, and that's important. That's what we have to do. Of course, you follow Ukraine. Before we do that, I do want to do this too. What's your reaction to the Trump case in Fulton County? Actually, where I am right now, the 4-person speaking. Have you had a chance to look at that? And because it's not clear whether or not, at least I haven't found any evidence yet, that there was a recommendation of an indictment of Donald Trump. But this 4-person is all over television.
Yeah, I don't, honestly, it's just confusing right now. It's weird. And
usually you never see anybody from the grand jury.
Yeah.
That's the nature. It's supposed to be.
It's weird. I don't even know what to make of it, to be honest. Not yet. I haven't seen anything that's conclusive or definitively explains what's going on.
Yeah. And then it's a question of whether or not there was an indictment. There was a statement made that there was no fraud. But I would have thought attempted fraud. I don't know if that's a legal term.
Yeah, it's conspiracy to commit fraud, right? You call it conspiracy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll watch that. So now,
just like attempted murder, right? You don't have to murder somebody to actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have really kept us and the Daily Kos community and the national community very well informed about the logistics of war. And know more about that than I ever would have. And Markos has talked about this. He kind of talked about it. I mean, we watch war from a distance, but he's kind of helped us understand supply lines, training, learning how to use new equipment. Oh my God. So I know all this from you. And I'm thinking, how on earth could they secure Biden on short notice like that? And they couldn't fly him in. I'm like, I couldn't even fathom how they pulled that off, just knowing what you shared with me about how complicated that was really dangerous, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's very so what happened is he snuck out of Washington D.C., not on Air Force One, on a different plane, so that people wouldn't notice. He landed in Poland in Raskau, which is near the Ukrainian border. He got on a train that is used to shuttle world leaders to Kyiv because nothing can fly in or out of Ukraine right now. The one piece of the Russian military machine that works is their anti-air defenses. So they got him on a 10-hour train ride, probably the longest train ride for a president since what, like Teddy Roosevelt, probably. And a 10-hour ride. Right before the train took off, the U.S. Notified Moscow, telling them that Biden was going to be in Kyiv, and basically, don't fuck with that, right? I'm sure that was it was said explicitly or it was implied heavily. And there was no air cover. There was no way that could be secured the way a president typically is. So it was an incredibly brave, somewhat risky effort to really demonstrate America's commitment to Ukraine's security and long-term promise to help defend itself against the illegal Russian invasion. And this is the first time in American history, actually, that a U.S. president has gone to a war zone that is not secured by U.S. forces. So it was the right thing to do. Everybody said it couldn't be done, and I'm sure the Secret Service was like, hell no. But in the end, the president is boss, and they won't say exactly what they did, and they shouldn't, because you don't want to let Russia know what security measures. Because Biden's not the only world leader that's making that trip. In fact, the day after Biden went, the Prime Minister of Italy was there, and our own administration officials. Nancy Pelosi was there. Secretary of Defense Austin had been there several times. You really don't want Russia to know exactly what those security measures are. So we don't know the full story. And I actually hope after the war is over that story is told, because I'm sure it'll be interesting. But there's just no way that Biden had the level of security that a U.S. president has 24/7. And so there was huge risk. And Russian media is like, Russian state propaganda is just absolutely, they're shell shocked by how impotent they look. And I was watching a translation of one of the state propaganda shows, and one of the guests was like, "This is a spit in our face," and it literally was. I mean, calling Russians, say like, "We're going to be in Kyiv, back off," and Putin knowing that he had no options, there was nothing he could do to do anything about it, really showed how pathetic Russia has become, 1 year into this war.
Yeah, that was a pretty serious move. And you mentioned 10-hour train. Well, one thing Biden likes is riding
there and out.
Yeah, it just 28 hours. That's like a whole day.
So 20 hours on that flight, and then he was in Kyiv for 4 hours. So it was so even if Russia didn't know he was coming in, I'm sure they knew once. They were informed, right? But the Ukrainian government shut down a bunch of blocks, and so Biden didn't actually mingle with Ukrainian citizens. That's probably the Secret Service was like, hell the heck no. But he got to do a lot more of that. Biden got to do a lot more of that in Poland, actually, where it was easier to, obviously it's not in the middle of a war zone, but it was an incredible statement. It's something that, those of us who support Ukraine have been wanting to see for a while. All the other world leaders have made the trip, of the coalition. Ours was the only one. And obviously the logistics of it were challenging and understandable. But the fact that Biden was able to pull it off was pretty amazing. And I love the MAGA reaction has been absolutely hysterically funny, because they're absolutely losing their minds over it. And, they had this narrative, Mark, right? Oh, he's such a bumbling fool. He's senile. He's being propped up like Weekend at Bernie's. Then you have the State of the Union address where he just raked them over the coals and made them look like fools. And now here he is, like strutting around like he's the boss. I mean, the images out of Ukraine and Poland are they're unbelievable. Yeah. Like, he's never looked better. He's never looked like more of a Dark Brandon rising. You've seen the memes, right? The Dark Brandon memes. Like, he was living the Dark Brandon memes in those places, strutting around in the war zone without the massive, massive American security detail that he usually gets. It shows that he had some, incredible guts. And so it's hard for conservatives when they have these like ridiculous narratives to see this happening and seeing those narratives just go up in flames. And in fact, some conservatives were complaining that it was too brave, that the presidency shouldn't be putting itself at risk, because now suddenly they care about Biden's safety, apparently. And so they couldn't even decide on what line of attack to use, because it was masterful. And then you have Mitch McConnell, who's been like Biden's best friend for the last 3 months, weirdly, has been backing up Biden against McCarthy on the debt limit, even on some of the Trump stuff. And here he was saying like, nah, that was great. What Biden did was great. And so it's funny, McConnell's playing this other weird game where he's like, I'm just going to be like Biden's best friend because I'm done with these MAGA fools. And so that Republican in disarray narrative is sort of doubling down, because they don't know what they're doing over there anymore.
Have we seen that headlining? We've always seen the Dems in disarray headline. Has anybody seen? Let us know if you've seen Republicans in disarray headline at the New York Times.
Nope, not yet.
Or anywhere else.
Yep.
May Eric Bollard rest in peace. Because I know that he would be calling. He stayed on top of that. I mean, that disarray. And you're right. You and I have been objectively critical of Biden and whether or not somebody 80 needs to be running places. But he might have heard us too and be like, I'm going to show these guys. I'm going to show Markos and Mark. I'm going to tear up the State of the Union. Let's show out. And then I'm going to take my bad behind in the middle of the night on a 10-hour train ride. Man, I couldn't do a 10-hour train ride each way. If they say that to me now, at my age, I'm not doing that. I can't do it. That's not I don't know what you would have to give me. You have to probably say that I just couldn't. No.
Yeah,
and then I'm going into a danger zone something literally could have happened. He's walking around in Kiev. Folks, be clear. I'm assuming this. They called the Kremlin, which was, makes sense. But it's like Putin, if he could, he'd want to get to Zelensky and kill him, wouldn't he? Zelensky is not just walking around aimlessly and free. He's living under the threat of an attack at any moment. So if Biden is going next to the person they would really like to take out, what possible, so let me just ask you this from your military knowledge and logistical perspective. And I know we don't want to say everything that they did, but you and I don't know anyway, but what can you speculate as to what kind of protocol was in place to absolutely ensure his safety? I don't think it's possible. The presidency, he travels in a security bubble. It is massive. They shut down entire miles of territory whenever he moves. It's why it's such a pain in the ass to be in the path of a presidential motorcade. And there was just absolutely no way. But he was walking around streets. Yeah, they shut the streets down, but what's stopping a saboteur from setting up shop in one of the apartment complexes overlooking the plaza? People saw him once they were there. They knew what was happening. The word got out really fast that Biden was actually in Kyiv itself. And but it also there's another split screen moment though, because on Monday, I think it was Monday. Vladimir Putin did a speech to his state, his pretend puppet legislature and generals and his whole like esteemed government officials on the 1-year anniversary of the war. And the speech itself was there was nothing there. It was actually kind of a disappointment. But what was amazing though is that his stage was probably like 100 feet from the front row of his own people, right? Because all those people in the audience were Putin loyalists. There's no such thing anymore as an opposition leader, right? It's not like you have Democrats and Republicans and Marjorie Taylor Greene, being, screaming at the president. Like that doesn't exist in Russia. It's a dictatorship. So it was his own people, and the front row is about 100 feet from Putin's stage, because he doesn't trust anybody. He thinks everybody's out to murder him. He's clearly paranoid. And then you contrast that with Zelensky and Biden strolling through Kyiv, people all around. And yeah, they shut down city streets for security reasons, but there were still government workers and employees. And
security details. And so he was walking around just surrounded by people. And then he goes to Poland, and he does an incredible speech with the most beautiful backdrops I think I have ever seen. Just stunning use of colors and lights with the Ukrainian colors and the American and Polish flags. It was just stunningly beautiful. I've never seen anything like it. It was literally Dark Brandon in real life. And he walks in kind of like he does at the State of the Union address, right? Crowds of people shaking his hand. He's waving, he's hugging everybody. And yeah, again, it's diplomats. It wasn't like random people on the street, right? But Putin doesn't even trust his own loyalists. Biden's out there in crowds of people. He doesn't know who they are. He doesn't care. And that contrast was dramatic. And Russian state propaganda didn't contrast. You're not going to criticize Putin, right? But they actually did have pictures of Biden strolling through Kyiv and his speech in Poland and walking the streets of Warsaw. And they were like, this is not good for us. I kept saying, this is not good for us. This is a great PR victory for Biden. This is a big moment for them. It's a terrible moment for us. And what I thought was even maybe the best part about it all was videos from regular Ukrainian soldiers out in the field, because they'll record these little snippets about what's going on in the front lines, and they post them online. And I track them all because it gives me some insight into what's going on the ground as you're trying to piece together, the situation on the ground, piercing through the fog of war, because everything is just propaganda. There's misinformation. There's honest confusion. So I'm always watching these video clips, and pretty much I'd say almost, if not all, almost all of them that I've seen in the last few days, they were so excited that Biden had visited. Like the excitement, like that gave them extra reason to fight, that they weren't alone, that, the United States, the most powerful nation in the world, the arsenal of democracy, leader of the free world, that they were, not only were they standing with Ukraine, because they know that already, they've been getting weapons, but that Biden risked his own life. They all understand. They live that, they're in that war zone. They understand what it means. It's not, for them, it's not theoretical. For them, it's real. And for them, so they know what it took for Biden to walk down the streets of Kyiv, and the morale boost was palpable. And again, even the Russians in their state propaganda made reference to that this is gonna improve morale with Ukrainian soldiers. And so it worked on so many different levels. And I don't want to discount the domestic component, because it really shatters that Republican narrative that Biden is somehow old and senile and non-functional. I mean, he's even liberals who are like, oh, he's too old, he should somebody else should run. He's like sending a message. He's like he's in his prime. That's what he's saying right now. I mean, he is on his A game.
There's courage, and then there's stupidity. So maybe your next civics poll, you ought to ask which is which: Biden going to Kyiv and Poland, or Trump telling him to turn off the magnetometers. Because he didn't know who was in that crowd. He could have got shot. You know what I'm saying? There was some real nut jobs in that crowd. He said, turn off the magnetometers. Yeah, these are my people. So yeah, that's a big difference there. Folks, again, big wins Tuesday night. I must say I was impressed by what Biden did, and the statement that made, and the risk involved. Even if I weren't concerned, if I were president and not concerned about the safety of losing my life, sitting on a train for 10 hours,
if not, yeah, you're not going to talk about Biden's vitality after he sat through 20 hours of train rides in a single day.
That is rough. And I don't know what they had on that train to make. I mean, they would have had just laid me straight out. I don't know. I just would have had to be a lot of comfort available. Markos Militsas, the dailykos.com, of course, civics with a Q.com. Markos, as always, we appreciate you.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate you. Love you. And talk to you next week. Yeah.
A lot of good news this week, folks. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.